MCDM has done it again, completing a wildly successful crowdfunding campaign, this time for their brand new MCDM RPG. That's the name. Catchy, right? Well, I for one am excited about this game. While they are making some lofty claims about what they intend to deliver, a tactical cinematic experience, I just overall am tickled that they are creating something of their very own in the space. And I've been invested in their success for years. I've backed every single one of their Kickstarters. Now, their newest offering is bringing a lot of new discussion to the table. Well, new is one way to put it. Maybe it's better to say their newest offering is rehashing an old argument that we've had about tabletop RPGs since the beginning of time. Let's go ahead and talk about the current controversy. Among the many announcements made about the MCDM RPG, the most concerning to a lot of people seems to be the announcement that in their game, missing in combat is now a thing of the past. In fact, they're not the only game to have made this claim about their upcoming RPGs. But for right now, this conversation seems to be pretty centered around MCDM. Obviously, this announcement has garnered a lot of opinions with a capital O. By a lot of opinions, what I mean is the same two opinions keep popping up, just wrapped in various colorful language. The first opinion is given by MCDM and supported by their fans. Missing isn't fun. Who wants to spend their free time sitting at a table watching their turn pass on by because a dice roll said they get to do nothing? Your free time fun with friends, your role is nothing. That's definitely an argument I can understand. The counter opinion is when you remove the ability to miss in combat, you remove the ability to fail, and that will ruin the game. Self-explanatory, right? Yeah, I get it. Okay, so in this debate, we clearly have two... Wait a second. Why do we want failure in the game? Why is this a desirable outcome? There's an argument that has been made for decades that failure is necessary for a game, especially a tabletop RPG. If you don't have failure, then you don't have a game. Failure implies risk. Risk makes tension. Tension makes fun. In short, failure serves as a contrast to success. Without the existence of failure, there is no tension, and success then loses all meaning. So it stands to reason that we want failure to exist because we want to give success weight. I mean, it feels good to succeed. And frankly, whenever I sit down to play any game, I'm chasing that feeling. My issue with this is that success and failure are very loaded terms. There is a definitiveness, a finality granted to something when we apply the words success or failure to it. When a business fails, the business is gone. When a business succeeds, they're thriving, and that's a company you want to get involved with. But I don't know that that's necessarily satisfactory. I'm sure we've all heard the old story about Thomas Edison. You know, Thomas Edison didn't create the light bulb overnight. Thomas Edison created 1,000 different light bulbs and failed 1,000 different times. And in the very end, he finally created the light bulb, or basically the prototype for the light bulb that we now use today. If you were to ask Edison, Edison would not claim that he failed 1,000 times at creating the light bulb. Edison instead is on record as having said they succeeded 1,000 different ways in showing how not to create a light bulb. If you were to look at the history books, Edison is not a failure despite having failed 1,000 times. He's a success by having completed the light bulb. Now, obviously, history books worth their salt would mention that Edison is a thief and kind of generally a bad person, but we're not going to go into that whole thing. It's the anecdote that I was looking for. So history wouldn't define those 1,000 mistakes as failure because ultimately it's led to a success. So how can we, as tabletop RPG players, define failure and success for our games? Okay, so let's go ahead and try to define failure in a tabletop RPG. If we were to go by the definition of failure that so many are giving in response to not being able to miss in combat, then I guess we could define failure as missing in combat. But that's kind of an odd definition, because let's say that I have a fighter in a group of, a fighter, a wizard, a cleric, and a rogue, right? We get into a combat with a dragon. Now, I, as the fighter, I miss every single attack roll against that dragon. Did I fail? Did we fail? What does failure mean? If the rest of the group scores nothing but critical hits, or the dragon horrifically fails all of their saving throws against spells, and that dragon goes down fast, I don't think anybody's going to be defining that encounter as a failure. If that dragon took one swing at my fighter, causing me to take or absorb a hit that could have led to a hit for one of my other party members, thereby giving my party members more time and more room to make those amazing critical hit attack rolls, then did I fail at doing my job just because I missed some attack rolls? I don't think so. I don't think we would define that as failure at all. Also, let's go ahead and look at the opposite of that. What if every single hit that I attempt hits, but it doesn't do enough damage, and the dragon still wins in the end and kills us all? Okay, well then, I will have succeeded a bunch of times, but ultimately I failed. I don't see this as a satisfactory answer, missing being a failure state. Okay, well what about dying? Dying should be the failure state, right? Clearly your character can die, so this means that you have failed. Except if you die in defense of the village and your sacrifice takes down the dragon that was attacking the village, did you fail or did you succeed just at great cost? Okay, also, if my character dies and then I can just make another character and rejoin the quest or the adventure, then my character failed, but I didn't fail because I get to keep playing. Or my party members could go to a local priest or find some sort of special artifact and bring my character back to life, right? So have I failed, or was that just a setback? Did I just spend some resources? If spending resources is a failure, then that means every archer who shoots an arrow and doesn't get it back is failing, right? This doesn't make any sense. Dying doesn't necessarily lead to failure. Or I guess it can, but it's not very definitive and it's not very final. Well, maybe failure can be defined as not completing the quest altogether, although that gets really close to story gaming, right? Here's what I mean. If the players have a choice between Adventure A and Adventure B, and they choose Adventure A, but it turns out that Adventure B leads ultimately to the destruction of the known world. Well, if the DM is going to hold to that, then what this means is that the party's game over, their failure state, happens off camera. Haha, gotcha, you ignored the big problem and everything got destroyed. That's not a really meaningful choice, is it? That kind of just seems like a screw job. And then if we do that too much, we're going to lead to another problem, which is stagnation, right? So if you keep doing this to your players and you keep asking them to make the choice, but only one will actually let the game continue, then players are going to look at these choices as something to be deliberated on for forever, and that will ultimately lead to a unfun time for most involved. Okay. What about a total party kill? Clearly, that is the failure state of a tabletop RPG. Except we could just make new characters and continue on the same adventure just from a slightly different perspective. We still lose a couple of things, but if we can ultimately finish the quest, then have we as a group failed? Now, I know we're looking more at a macro level here. Now we're talking about the group as a whole rather than the characters individual. But again, I don't think those individual failures really add up to much. A total party kill could lead to failure, but it doesn't necessarily have to, depending on how the dungeon master wants to handle it or how the group wants to handle it. I, again, don't find a total party kill to be a great example of a failure state because, again, you can still continue to succeed. I see that in many cases, a total party kill could just be a setback, a frustrating setback, but a setback, which isn't the same as a failure. Now, I want to put a pin in a total party kill because I think hidden within there is the answer that I'm looking for. Now, if I'm going to be honest, I don't like any of these definitions. I don't think any of these lead to a true failure state because ultimately the group can make the decision to keep going in some way or another. That's one of the beautiful parts about playing a tabletop RPG. The story isn't done until we all decide it's done. I don't particularly love these definitions for failure and success when it comes to a tabletop RPG. I mean, we take the first one about, the idea that missing means failure, but I don't see that as necessarily being true. And when it comes to like the missless mechanic that MCDM and other games are trying to push forward, sure, you can hit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that hit had an effect, right? We look at the idea that a hit means something specific, right? In Dungeons and Dragons, if you swing with a longsword dealing 1d8 plus 5 damage, we assume that a hit is 1d8 plus 5 damage, but maybe that's not how the damage mechanic works in MCDM, right? Maybe you roll a low roll, and that means that you deal 1 damage, and you open yourself up to a counterattack from the enemy for 30 damage. That's not sustainable. Sure, you succeeded, but you also failed. I really don't think success or failure really applies. I think we call it success, but with a cost, right? Which isn't really success. It isn't really failure. It's something else entirely. The thing is, failure overall is ill-defined, and I don't think any of these definitions work for a tabletop RPG, at least not as a catch-all whole, like people try to use it. But there is one specific case where I think a failure state truly exists in a tabletop RPG. The answer to what is considered a failure state or a success state in a tabletop RPG, I think, boils down to why we play tabletop RPGs in the first place. Now, there's 1,000 different reasons given by 1,000 different people as to why we play, but I personally think it boils down to we are looking for an enjoyable experience. That's why we play any game, right? We're looking to pass the time in an enjoyable way. If we look at the point of playing a tabletop RPG as being a way to create an enjoyable experience, either with ourselves or with others, then the definition of success changes. The definition of success becomes the ability to continue to make these experiences with these or other people. It doesn't matter whether it has setbacks and frustrations. It doesn't matter whether it has critical hits and, quest completion. It's really all about whether you and others are enjoying themselves. This is looking at failure and success from a very macro level, from outside of the game itself, or really just the game itself. The act of playing the game is where we find our failure and success states. In this case, the only true failure state of a tabletop RPG is when the game falls apart. People stop enjoying themselves. They stop showing up. Game night is just gone. That is the failure state of a tabletop RPG. People stop playing. And this is what I was trying to say with the total party kill being the way to lead to a failure state in the game. It's not that the fact that the characters died that creates the failure. It's rather what is the result of that. If the dungeon master says, sorry, all of the characters died, the world is over, you all failed, no more game, then yeah, it's failed. It's done. That's what I mean by total party kills leading to a failure state. On the other hand, if the dungeon master then says, all right, let's make some new characters, we've got a world to save, then there's been a major setback, but there wasn't a failure state. Failure is the dissolution of the shared experience. Success is the continuation of it. Now, the mechanics of a given game can certainly affect the ultimate failure or success of the game at the table. Unfun mechanics will lead to unsatisfying experiences or undesirable outcomes, and eventually people will stop playing because it's just not fun. On the other hand, fun mechanics can lead to desirable experiences and satisfying experiences. Maybe you didn't defeat the dragon this time around, but you had a lot of exploding dice and a ton of critical hits, and that just felt awesome. Mechanics can affect this, but they aren't the sole decider of a failure state or a success state. What is considered satisfying and what is considered desirable is just too subjective to really narrow down. Everybody has different tastes, everybody has different desires for what they want from a game, and this is very likely the reason why we have so many different tabletop RPGs, is to try to accommodate that many different tastes and desires. To that point, to speak of a mechanic like no missing in combat as a definitive statement to whether the game is fun or not, that just seems really personal. That's your opinion, man. And it can't be taken as an overarching statement of truth. Not for everyone, at least. Like, I'm not saying you can't have an opinion. Just know what it is. Understand that what you're saying is really, I don't want this. And that's fine. For me personally, until I have a chance to experience these mechanics at a table, I can't really decide whether this is a good mechanic or a bad mechanic. I don't know if it's going to lead to a fun and desirable state at my table. And until I do, I can't tell you whether this leads to failure or success within the game, if it gets rid of it or keeps it. Look, I know it's unsatisfying to end this video on the idea that success and failure in the game is not determined on an individual round-by-round basis. It cheapens the experience to say that success is playing in the first place, right? The real goal is having fun and creating a positive shared experience. That doesn't feel good because that's something you do every week, and that seems mundane. But I don't think it's any more mundane than saying a successful attack roll is success, because I do that all the time too. And if failure is just missing a roll, well, then I don't know that I want to spend my entire week failing, because I miss a lot. But either way, I guess that lack of satisfaction is sort of the point, isn't it? I mean, we're all looking to have a solid answer, to add weight to what we do. We want to feel like these games and the experiences we have meaning, so we start to apply those words, those meaningful words like success or failure, to every individual action that we can, because ultimately we want to feel that not only these words have weight, but what we choose to do has weight. But for me, I'm willing to accept that success simply means I get to spend more time with my friends and people I care about, doing something that we all love, spending time together, creating awesome stories, and fighting fake dragons. Have a good one.